There are places on the map that God forgot, and the devil paved over. Route 9, winding through the Blackwater swamps of Louisiana, is one of those places. It's a stretch of asphalt where the shadows seem a little longer, the silence a little heavier, and where a scream can be swallowed whole by the humidity and the moss. At 1:45, the neon sign of Rick's Roadside Grill was the only light for 20 miles. It buzzed like an angry hornet, fighting a losing battle against the storm pounding the metal roof. For Bear, the road captain of the Redeemers Motorcycle Club, the diner wasn't a destination. It was a necessity. He had been riding for 10 hours straight. His pack, the rest of the brothers, were delayed by a breakdown 3 towns back. Bear had ridden ahead to scout the route and secure a meeting point. He was alone. A solitary giant on a steel horse, wrapped in wet leather and exhaustion. When Bear pushed the door open, the bell chimed with a cheerful sound that didn't fit the room. The air inside smelled of stale grease, old coffee, and something else, something sharp and metallic. Fear. Bear didn't just walk into a room, he occupied it. Standing 6'4" and built like a mountain range, he carried an atmosphere of heavy, calculated silence. He shook the rain from his sleeveless vest, the Redeemer's patch glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. He scanned the room. Force of habit. One exit in the back. Windows covered in grime. Empty booths with torn vinyl. And her. Sarah stood behind the counter like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She couldn't have been more than 19. She was thin, painfully so, with a uniform that hung off her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was gripping a coffee pot so hard her knuckles were white. Bear walked to the booth furthest from the door, the tactical spot, back to the wall, eyes on the entrance. He sat down, the leather creaking under his weight. "Coffee, black, and the steak special," Bear rumbled. His voice was deep, a gravelly sound that seemed to vibrate through the table. Yes, sir," Sarah stammered. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. As she poured his water, her hand jerked. Water splashed onto the Formica table. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll clean it," she gasped, grabbing a rag from her apron. She started scrubbing the spot frantically, her eyes darting toward the kitchen door. Bear watched her. He didn't look at the water. He looked at her wrists. As she scrubbed, her long sleeve rode up just an inch. It was enough. Bear saw the marks, 4 distinct, yellowing bruises in the shape of fingers. Someone had grabbed her. Hard. Recently. Bear's internal radar, honed by years on the street and 2 tours overseas, began to ping. Something is wrong here, he thought. This isn't just a clumsy waitress. This is a girl who expects to be hit for making a mistake. He caught her eye. "It's just water, kid. Breathe." Sarah looked at him, and for a split second, the mask slipped. The customer service smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. She looked at the kitchen door again. Behind the stainless steel pass-through window, a man was watching. Rick, the owner. He was a small man with shifting eyes and a layer of sweat on his upper lip that had nothing to do with the heat of the grill. He was watching Bear with the hunger of a vulture and the nervousness of a prey animal. He caught Sarah's eye and tapped his watch aggressively. The message was clear. "Hurry up." Sarah flinched. She retreated to the kitchen. Bear sat in the silence, listening to the rain. He checked his phone. No signal. He was in a dead zone, cut off from his brothers. He was completely alone. 10 minutes later, Sarah emerged. She carried a heavy ceramic plate loaded with a T-bone steak, eggs, and fries. It smelled good. Too good for a dump like this. But Sarah wasn't walking right. Her steps were wooden, forced. She approached the table like she was walking to the gallows. She set the plate down in front of Bear. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice robotic. Bear picked up his fork. "No, this is fine." He was about to cut into the meat when Sarah's hand shot out. She reached for the salt shaker, but instead of grabbing it, she backhanded it. The shaker toppled, the cap flew off, and a mountain of white salt spilled across the table and onto Bear's leather glove. "Oh God, I'm so clumsy," Sarah cried out, loud. Too loud. She lunged forward with a wad of napkins, reaching for his hand to wipe off the salt. Bear didn't move. He let her grab his hand. But she didn't wipe. She squeezed. Bear felt the pressure of her small, trembling hand through his leather glove. She pressed a crumpled ball of paper into his palm. She leaned in close, her face inches from his, ostensibly to clean the table. Her eyes locked onto his. The terror was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading intensity. She didn't speak, but her lips moved clearly. "Don't. Talk." She pulled back, leaving the napkin in his closed fist. I'll get you a fresh napkin, sir," she said breathlessly, turning and hurrying back toward the kitchen. Bear sat frozen. His heart rate didn't jump. He trained himself out of panic years ago, but his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. He slowly lowered his hand below the table edge. He unfolded the napkin. It was scrawled in red marker, the letters shaky and hurried. "Poison. He sold you out. They are 5 mins away. Please take me with you." Bear looked at the steak. The steam rising from it didn't look appetizing anymore. It looked like a death sentence. Poison. Rick, the sweaty man in the kitchen, wasn't just a bad boss. He was a pawn. Someone had bought him. Someone knew the Redeemers were coming through. 5 minutes. Bear checked his watch. If the note was right, the ambush was 4 minutes out. A rival gang. Probably the Copperheads, judging by the territory. They wouldn't come to talk. They would come to execute. Before the chaos begins, I have a quick question for you. If you were sitting in that booth, alone and outnumbered, what would you do? And more importantly, where in the world are you watching this story from? Pause for a second, scroll down, and comment your city or country below. We love seeing our Gentle Bikers family growing all over the globe. Also, please hit that like button to support the channel. Ready? Let's see what Bear does next. Bear looked at the kitchen door. Rick was watching him, waiting for him to take that first bite, waiting for the big biker to slump over so they could drag him out back before the hit squad arrived. Bear looked at Sarah. She was standing by the coffee station, hugging herself. She had just signed her own death warrant. If Rick knew she had warned him, if the gang arrived and found Bear conscious, they would kill her. She knew it. And she did it anyway. She was a civilian, a kid, and she had just risked everything to save a stranger who looked like a monster. Please take me with you. That was the part that hit Bear the hardest. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea for extraction. She was a prisoner here. Bear felt a shift inside his chest. The exhaustion vanished. The cold, wet misery of the ride vanished. It was replaced by a familiar, burning heat. The heat of the protector. He wasn't just a biker anymore. He was a redeemer. And the Redeemers had a simple code. Innocence is the only thing worth bleeding for. He picked up his fork. He saw Rick's eyes light up in the kitchen window. Bear cut a piece of steak. He lifted it to his lips. He saw Rick grin. Then Bear stopped. He lowered the fork. He looked directly at the kitchen window, locked eyes with Rick, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a wolf that just realized the sheep are trapped in the pen with him. He crumpled the napkin in his fist. "You made a mistake, Rick," he thought. "You bet against the wrong horse. You thought you were trapping an animal, but you just locked yourself in a cage with the beast." Bear stood up. He didn't run for the door. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply walked toward the counter, toward Sarah. The promise was made in silence. He wasn't leaving this diner without her, and anyone who tried to stop them was going to learn why they call them gentle giants. Because nothing is more terrifying than a giant who stops being gentle. Bear moved. It wasn't a sudden jerk or a frantic dash. It was the slow, tectonic shifting of a mountain. He pushed himself up from the booth, the leather of his vest groaning like the rigging of a ship in a storm. He stood to his full height, 6'4" of hardened muscle and resolve, and let his shadow fall over the table, where the poisoned steak still steamed. 5 minutes. That's what the note said. That means I have 3 minutes to secure the girl, 1 minute to neutralize the rat in the kitchen, and 60 seconds to prepare a welcome party. Plenty of time. He didn't look at the door. He didn't look at his bike outside. He looked at Sarah. She was frozen by the coffee machine, her breath coming in short, terrified gasps. She looked at him with wide eyes, waiting for him to run, waiting for him to abandon her. That's what everyone else had done in her life. Why would this stranger be any different? Bear took a step toward her. The sound of his heavy boot hitting the linoleum floor was louder than the thunder outside. In the kitchen, Rick's grin faltered. He watched the biker stand up. He saw the uneaten food. And then, he saw the napkin in Bear's fist. The color drained from Rick's face so fast it looked like he'd been bled dry. He knew. The biker knew. Rick's hands, slick with sweat and grease, fumbled under the stainless steel counter. He wasn't reaching for a spatula. He was reaching for the rusty .38 snub nose he kept taped near the register. He was a gambler, a cheat, and a coward. But a cornered rat is a dangerous thing. He knows, Rick thought in panic. He's coming for me. If the copperheads find him awake, they kill me. If he gets to me first, he kills me. I have to put him down. Rick's fingers brushed the cold steel of the gun. Bear saw the shift in Rick's eyes. He saw the shoulder dip. He knew that look. It was the look of a man deciding to do something stupid. Bear didn't run. He exploded. He covered the distance to the counter in 2 long strides. He didn't go around it. He went over it. He placed one hand on the formica top and vaulted, his legs clearing the register with practiced ease. Sarah screamed. Rick pulled the gun. He got it level with Bear's chest. But Bear was already there. Bear didn't strike him. He didn't punch him. That wasn't the way of the Redeemers. Controlled force. Always controlled. Bear's left hand shot out and clamped over the barrel of the gun, and Rick's hand, swallowing them both. His grip was absolute. It was the crushing pressure of a hydraulic press. He twisted his wrist, a sharp, efficient movement, and forced the gun barrel pointing straight up at the ceiling. "No," Bear said. It was a simple word, spoken without anger. It was a statement of fact. He shoved Rick backward. Rick stumbled, his feet tangling in a rubber floor mat, and slammed into the back wall, rattling the pots and pans hanging from the hooks. Bear pinned him there with one forearm against his chest, lifting the smaller man onto his toes. The gun clattered to the floor, useless. Bear looked into Rick's eyes. He smelled the fear on him. It smelled like sour milk and cheap whiskey. He saw the pupils dilated with panic. Look at him, Bear thought. This is what a man looks like when he sells his soul for a few dollars. He didn't just sell me out. He sold that girl. He was going to let them kill us both, and then wash the blood off his floor before the breakfast rush. You sell cheap, Rick, Bear said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through Rick's chest cavity. How much was it? How much to drug a stranger? How much to feed that girl to the wolves? They made me, Rick spluttered, spit flying. The Copperheads. They own the debt. They said if I didn't hold you, they'd burn the place down. They're coming. You have to leave. I am leaving, Bear said. He released Rick, letting him slide down the wall like a sack of wet laundry. But not alone. Bear turned his back on the owner. Rick wasn't the threat anymore. He was furniture. Bear looked at Sarah. She was pressed into the corner of the prep station, shielding her face with her arms, waiting for the violence to spill over onto her. Bear stopped. He took a breath, letting the adrenaline settle, softening his face. He couldn't be the monster right now. He had to be the shelter. Sarah, he said. She peeked out from behind her arms. Get your coat, Bear said. You're clocking out. My ID, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He has my passport. In the safe. I can't leave without it. Bear looked at Rick. He didn't have to speak. The look was enough. Rick, trembling on the floor, pointed a shaking finger toward a small metal box under the sink. Bear ripped the door off the box, literally tore the cheap metal hinges, and grabbed a worn passport. He handed it to Sarah. Put it in your pocket, he commanded gently. Stay behind me. Hold on to the back of my vest. Do not let go. Do you understand? Sarah nodded. She grabbed the back of his leather vest, her small fingers clutching the Redeemer's patch like a lifeline. Good girl, Bear thought. Now comes the hard part. The note said 5 minutes. We used 3. Then, the world turned white. High beams. Not 1 set, but 3. They cut through the rain and the grime of the windows, blinding and harsh. The sound of tires tearing up gravel outside was deafening. They're here. Bear checked his position. The back door was a gamble. It opened into the swamp. If they ran, they'd be hunted in the dark. The front door was the choke point. Stay down, Bear told Sarah. He pushed her gently behind the solid oak counter. Count to 100. Slow. Bear walked out from behind the counter. He stood in the center of the diner, facing the front door. He cracked his neck. One side, then the other. He adjusted his gloves. He was one man. Outside, car doors slammed. Voices shouted over the wind. The distinctive clack-clack of a baseball bat dragging on pavement. Chains rattling. This wasn't a meeting. It was a lynch mob. The front door didn't open. It exploded inward. A boot kicked it so hard the glass shattered. The wind and rain rushed in, bringing the smell of ozone and violence. 6 men stepped inside. They were the Copperheads. They didn't look like bikers. They looked like scavengers. Mismatched denim, bandanas, rusted weapons. They were a street gang that rode bikes, not a motorcycle club. There is a difference. A big difference. The leader walked in first. He was holding a tire iron. He looked at the booth where Bear was supposed to be slumped over, unconscious. It was empty. Then he looked at the center of the room. Bear was standing there, arms crossed over his massive chest, feet shoulder-width apart. He looked like a statue carved out of granite and bad intentions. The leader paused. The 5 men behind him bumped into each other, stopping short. They expected a victim. They found a warrior. "Rick!" the leader screamed, looking around. "You had one job, you useless coward!" "Rick is retired," Bear said. His voice cut through the noise of the storm. "And you boys are trespassing." The leader laughed. It was a jagged, ugly sound. "Trespassing? We own this road, old man, and we own everything on it, including you." He stepped forward, tapping the tire iron against his palm. Thwack, thwack, Thwack. "You're big," the leader admitted, sneering. "But you're one guy, and I count 6 of us. Math isn't on your side, Redeemer." Bear didn't flinch. He watched their eyes. He watched their feet. He was calculating the angles. Leader is right-handed, favors his left leg, Bear analyzed. The 2 on the flank are nervous. They're holding their bats too tight. The one in the back has a knife tucked in his belt. 6 against 1. I can take 3 of them before they drag me down. Maybe 4. But Sarah, if I go down, they get to Sarah. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away," Bear said. "Turn around, get in your cars, drive until you run out of gas, and maybe you get to keep your teeth." "Get him," the leader screamed. The violence erupted all at once. The leader swung the tire iron, aiming for Bear's head. It was a kill shot. Bear moved inside the swing. He stepped forward, taking the blow on his heavy leather shoulder pad. It hurt. A sharp crack of pain that would bruise bone, but it didn't break him. He grabbed the leader's arm and used the man's own momentum to spin him around. Bear slammed the leader face first into the nearest table, shattering the wood. 1 down. 2 more rushed him. A baseball bat swung for his ribs. Bear caught it with his left hand, ignoring the sting, and delivered a short, controlled palm strike to the attacker's nose. There was a sickening crunch. The man dropped. But there were too many. Someone jumped on Bear's back. Another tackled his legs. Bear roared, shaking them off like a grizzly bear shaking off a pack of wolves, but they dragged him toward the window. A fist connected with his jaw. A boot caught him in the ribs. Sarah screamed from behind the counter. Bear stumbled back, crashing into the jukebox. The glass shattered. He was breathing hard, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. He raised his fists. He was still standing, but they were circling again. "Hold him down!" the leader screamed, spitting blood from his broken nose. "Cut him!" The man with the knife stepped forward. Bear braced himself. This was it. He would make them pay for every inch. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he thought. "I tried. I just need to hold them for 1 more minute. Just 1 more. And then..." The floor started to vibrate. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't the fight. The vibration came from the ground up. The coffee in the pot rippled. The loose spoons on the tables rattled. A sound grew outside. A sound deeper than thunder. Lower than a growl. It was the sound of synchronization, the sound of American steel singing in unison. The copperhead stopped. The man with the knife looked at the door. "What is that?" one of them whispered. Bear smiled. His teeth were stained with blood, but the smile was genuine. "That," Bear said, wiping his eye, "is the rest of the conversation." The darkness outside was suddenly banished. A wall of headlights, 10, 20, maybe 30, flooded the parking lot. The roar of the engines was deafening, drowning out the rain, drowning out the fear. The Redeemers had arrived. They didn't park politely. They rode right up to the door, forming a semicircle of blinding light and chrome. Kickstands went down. Boots hit the gravel. The door opened. "Wrench," the vice president walked in first. He was holding a large torque wrench, his namesake. Behind him was Tiny, who was 7 feet tall and had to duck to enter the doorway. Behind them were a dozen more. They were wet. They were tired, and they saw their road captain bleeding against a jukebox. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The copperheads, who had felt so tough a moment ago, suddenly realized they weren't predators. They were tourists in a lion's den. Wrench looked at the copperheads. Then he looked at Bear. "Sorry we're late, brother," Wrench said. his voice calm and deadly. "Traffic was a bitch. Did you save any for us?" Bear straightened his vest. He stepped away from the jukebox. "Just the trash," Bear said. "Time to take it out." The confrontation ended before it really began. You see, thugs like the Copperheads fight for money or for ego. They fight when they have the advantage. The Redeemers fight for each other. When the wall of black leather vests moved forward, the Copperheads dropped their weapons. The tire iron hit the floor with a clang. The knife skittered away. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and completely outclassed. Bear walked through the crowd of his brothers. He went straight to the counter. He reached over and helped Sarah stand up. She was shaking, terrified by the violence, by the noise. "It's okay," Bear whispered, shielding her from the sight of the Copperheads being escorted out by Tiny and Doc. "It's over. You're safe now." Sarah looked at him, then at the army of men that had filled the diner. You stayed," she whispered. "You asked me to," Bear said, "and we don't break promises." The storm passed, as storms always do. The rain slowed to a drizzle, but the flashing lights of the county sheriff's cruisers kept the night bright and chaotic. Sheriff Miller wasn't like the deputies on Rick's payroll. He was an old-school lawman, the kind who wore his badge straight and didn't look the other way. When he arrived, he found 18 bikers standing guard over 6 tied-up gang members and one very terrified diner owner. He didn't find a brawl. He found a crime scene that had already been secured. Tiny, the 7-foot-tall Redeemer, handed the sheriff the steak knife and the napkin. "Attempted murder," Tiny rumbled, pointing at the cold T-bone on the table. "You might want to run a tox screen on that meat, Sheriff, and check the owner's safe. Pretty sure you'll find the rest of the sedative." Rick tried to talk. He tried to spin a story about a biker gang taking over his restaurant. But guilt has a smell, and Rick reeked of it. When the sheriff saw the bruises on Sarah's wrists, bruises that Rick had put there, the handcuffs came out. "It's over," Bear thought. "The rats are in the cage." But justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about restoring the innocent. And we aren't done yet. Bear watched from the porch as Rick was shoved into the back of a cruiser. Rick looked at Bear one last time. He didn't see anger in the biker's eyes. He saw indifference. Bear had already forgotten him. Rick was just an obstacle that had been removed. Sarah sat on the tailgate of Wrench's pickup truck. Someone had given her a dry flannel shirt that swallowed her small frame. Someone else had found a box of tea in the kitchen and made her a cup. She watched the police cars drive away. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the low idle of the motorcycles. She was shivering, but not from the cold. It was the adrenaline crash. The realization that she was alive, that she hadn't been thrown into the swamp, that the nightmare she had lived in for 6 months had ended in exactly 45 minutes. Bear walked over to her. The other bikers gave them space, turning their backs to give them a moment of privacy, forming a perimeter of respect. Bear took off his gloves. His hands were scarred, stained with grease and old ink, but when he reached into his vest pocket, his movement was careful. "You did good, kid," Bear said. His voice was soft, the gravel gone. "Most people, they would have looked the other way. They would have let me eat that steak." Sarah looked down at her tea. I couldn't let him kill you." "You saved my life," Bear said. "Now, let's see if we can save yours." He held out a thick, white envelope. While the police were taking statements, Wrench had passed a helmet around the pack. It was an old tradition among the Redeemers. When a brother went down, or a family needed help, the hat went around. No one counted what went in. No one asked questions. You just gave what you had, and tonight the Redeemers had given a lot. "What is this?" Sarah asked, staring at the envelope. "Severance pay," Bear said with a slight smile, "and a travel fund. There's enough in there to get you to your sister in Texas, or anywhere else you want to go, enough to start over, to get a place where no one grabs your wrist." Sarah took the envelope. It was heavy, heavier than any paycheck she had ever earned. She opened the flap. It was full of 20s, 50s, hundreds. She looked up at Bear, tears spilling over again. But these weren't tears of terror. They were tears of disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Bear looked at the Redeemer's patch on Wrench's vest nearby. He looked at the skull tattoo on his own arm. "Because I was you once," he thought. Scared. Trapped. Waiting for a hero who never came. "I swore that if I ever got strong enough, I'd be that hero for someone else." "We know enough," Bear said. "We know you stood up when you were terrified. That makes you family." "Can you ride?" Bear asked. Sarah wiped her face. She looked at the diner, that dark, greasy prison where she had lost a year of her life. Then she looked at the row of gleaming motorcycles. "Yes," she said. A small, genuine smile broke through the grime on her face. "I can ride." Bear handed her a spare helmet. She strapped it on. It was a little big, but it felt like armor. She climbed onto the back of Bear's massive touring bike. The pack mounted up. Engines fired. The sound was a symphony of freedom. As they pulled out of the gravel lot, Sarah didn't look back. She didn't look at the closed sign hanging crookedly in the window. She pressed her face against the back of Bear's leather vest, closed her eyes, and listened to the wind. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just surviving. She was moving forward. Dawn broke over the Louisiana swampland, not with a whimper, but with a blaze of gold. The storm clouds that had choked the night sky were retreating, chased away by the rising sun. On the highway, the Redeemers rode. They moved as one organism, a thundering serpentine creature of chrome and leather cutting through the morning mist. In the middle of the pack, safe within the diamond formation, Sarah held on to Bear. She wasn't trembling anymore. She leaned into the turns. She felt the vibration of the engine in her bones, a constant, powerful hum that whispered safety, safety, safety. For the first time in her life, the road ahead didn't look like a dead end. It looked like a horizon. Bear watched the mile markers fly by. He felt the weight of the passenger behind him, and it was a good weight. It was the weight of a promise kept. "People look at us, and they see the tattoos," he reflected. "They see the scowls. They see the skull on my arm, and they assume it stands for death. They don't know. They don't know that the skull reminds us that life is short, and innocence is rare. They don't know that the toughest leather is worn by the softest hearts, because we're the ones who have to guard against the cold." He thought about the napkin in his pocket, that crumpled, grease-stained piece of paper. To anyone else, it was trash. To Bear, it was a medal of honor. It was proof that courage doesn't require muscles or weapons. It just requires a voice and the will to use it when everyone else stays silent. That napkin didn't end up in the trash. Today, if you walk into the Redeemer's chapter house, past the pool tables and the bar, you'll see a corkboard on the back wall. It's reserved for things that matter. Pinned right in the center is a white napkin with shaky red writing. Poison. He sold you out. It hangs there as a reminder to every prospect who walks through the door. A reminder that help can come from the most unexpected places, and that when it does come, you owe a debt that can only be paid forward. They dropped Sarah off at the station 2 towns over, safely out of the Copperheads' reach. Wrench bought her ticket. Tiny carried her bags. When she hugged Bear goodbye, she didn't hug a stranger. She hugged a brother. "You saved me," she had whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "No, kid," Bear had replied, his hand resting on her head. "You saved me. I was just the cavalry. You were the scout." She got on that bus with money in her pocket and a fire in her spirit. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor. And somewhere in Texas, a sister was about to get her family back. Bear sits alone on his bike, watching the bus pull away. He puts his sunglasses back on. The gentle giant mask returns. We live in a world that tells us to mind our own business, to keep our heads down, to walk past the trouble. We are told that heroes are billionaires in iron suits or super soldiers with shields. But that's a lie. Heroes are the waitresses who risk their lives to pass a note. Heroes are the truck drivers who pull over to help. Heroes are the bikers who ride through a hurricane because a stranger is in danger. They are the gentle giants. They are the ones who understand that strength isn't given to you so you can rule over others. Strength is given to you so you can lift others up. So the next time you see a pack of motorcycles roaring down the highway, don't just roll up your window and look away. Look closer. Look at the faces behind the beards. Look at the stories inked into their skin. You might just be looking at the only thing standing between a monster and an innocent child. You might be looking at family. Because family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins. Family is about who bleeds for you when the knife comes out. Family is who shows up. And the redeemers? They always show up. This story is dedicated to the brave souls who speak up when it's dangerous, and the protectors who answer the call. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share this message with the world. And if you believe that true strength is gentle, subscribe to our channel and join the Brotherhood. My name is Narrator, and until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your heart open. Ride safe.